Welcome back to our channel. It sat quietly among hundreds of similar coins, passed from hand to hand without a second glance. Minted in the twilight of a turbulent decade, the 1978 U.S. Washington quarter bore the dignified image of America's first president on its obverse, the proud eagle on its reverse, a design familiar to millions. No one at the Philadelphia Mint could have imagined that one of these ordinary pieces would, decades later, become the subject of hushed conversations at coin shows and speculative forums. And yet, it was within this very year's run, amid the routine clatter of presses and conveyor belts, that something slipped, a moment of mechanical imperfection, nearly invisible, but ultimately seismic. The 1978 quarter wasn't born into a monumental year of change. Unlike its silver predecessors or the statehood series to come, it was produced at a time when quarters were primarily workhorses of commerce. Copper-nickel clad, devoid of the gleam of silver, its 91.67% copper core was enveloped in 8.33% nickel standard since 1965. With over 521 million pieces struck in Philadelphia and another 287 million in Denver, this coin was intended for saturation, not admiration. But the machines that struck these coins, no matter how precise, were still products of their time. Dies wore out. Planchets misfed. Slight misalignments crept in under the relentless churn of high-volume production. Somewhere in the shuffle, a new die, slightly flawed but not caught in the final inspection, found its way into operation. A die that would inadvertently produce one of the most curious anomalies of late 20th century American coinage. Not a double die, not an off-center strike, this was something subtler. A detail overlooked not by accident, but by mechanical fatigue and human habit. In a cluttered basement in suburban Maryland, years later, a retired postal worker named Howard Lincoln was flipping through a worn coin folder passed down from his father. Howard wasn't a seasoned numismatist. He simply enjoyed the tactile nature of coins, the quiet satisfaction of slotting a new find into its designated space. As he sifted through duplicates of 1970s quarters, a glint of oddity caught his eye. One 1978 quarter felt wrong. The rim was unusually thick on one side, tapering strangely on the other. The date, too, seemed slightly tilted, as though leaning away from the viewer. Intrigued, he placed it under an old magnifying lens. The more he stared, the less sense it made. The eagle on the reverse, usually bold and centered, seemed skewed slightly clockwise, its right talon almost brushing the edge of the rim. But it was the edge of the coin that truly puzzled him. There was a faint doubling, not the sharp doubling typical of known error varieties, but a shadow-like echo along the letters in Liberty and $quarter. Not prominent enough to be labeled a classic double die, but enough to stir a sense of unease. He set the coin aside, unsure whether he had found something or merely imagined a flaw. He took the coin to a local coin show, not expecting much. At one of the quieter tables, an older gentleman with a lanyard full of A&A pins studied it, then leaned back in silence. "You've got something here," he muttered, pulling out a loop with a practiced hand. "Not a common error. Looks like a rotational die misalignment, slight die fatigue, and possible partial collar strike. That's a cocktail of trouble right there." Howard blinked. The terms were unfamiliar, but the tone was unmistakable curiosity seasoned with caution. The man jotted down a few notes, offered to buy it for $50. Howard declined. He had no intention of parting with it yet. Over the next several months, Howard plunged into research. He joined online forums, read articles, sent emails to experts. Opinions varied. Some called it a minor curiosity. Others, upon seeing high-resolution images, were more enthusiastic. It wasn't just one error. It was the confluence of several, a compound error that produced a visually off-kilter but mechanically fascinating result. The partial collar had created a misaligned rim. The slight die rotation caused the reverse to twist ever so subtly. And the die fatigue had left ghostly impressions of letters, visible under the right light. It wasn't beautiful in the traditional sense. It was flawed, awkward, but undeniably rare. When Howard submitted the coin to a major grading service, the response took weeks. It returned in a slab labeled, "Mint error, partial color strike, rotated die, 58 Australian dollars. Not a perfect grade, but certainly better than pocket change. He listed it quietly in a private auction. It sold for $300. Not long after, whispers began circulating in coin circles. Others began combing through rolls of 1978 quarters. A few similar pieces emerged, never identical, but echoing the same combination of errors. Some had thicker rims. Others had slightly twisted reverses. A small cluster, all from Philadelphia. A pattern was forming. By 2013, the value of verified examples began creeping upward. Coin dealers who once overlooked the 1978 quarter now scrutinized them with careful eyes. A coin once worth 25 cents was now occasionally commanding hundreds, sometimes over 1,000, depending on clarity and condition. Collectors loved the narrative, the hidden error, the obscure minting flaw, the blue-collar collector turned discoverer. But the story didn't stop there. At a numismatic symposium in 2017, an independent researcher presented findings that shifted the narrative. Using metallurgical analysis and die tracking software, he proposed a controversial theory. The flaw wasn't a simple accident. The coin, he argued, showed signs of being struck during a test run using outdated dies repolished from 1977. His evidence was buried in the microtexture of the eagle's feathers, minuscule discrepancies that matched 1977 reverse dies more than those typically used in 1978. This revelation rippled through the collecting community. If true, it suggested that at least a portion of the 1978 error quarters were not only misstruck, but also struck with reused die elements, an exceedingly rare practice in official U.S. Mint protocol. It hinted at either an unauthorized die usage or a desperate fix during an equipment shortage, neither of which were officially documented. The lack of records only deepened the mystery. A few skeptics dismissed the theory, but others, emboldened by the intrigue, began reevaluating their collections. Auction listings for the error quarter now began to include the phrase, "possible transitional die use." Prices climbed accordingly. By 2020, a particularly well-struck example surfaced on an online marketplace. Listed at a starting bid of $7,500, it featured all three primary error characteristics: partial collar, clockwise die rotation, and soft letter ghosting. It also displayed the debated feather patterns on the eagle. The listing caught fire. Bidders came from Europe, South America, and Asia. When the dust settled, the coin had sold for $14,200. What made this error so compelling wasn't just its physical characteristics, it was the layered story. Each coin seemed to tell a different version of the same anomaly. Some bore sharper impressions, others more exaggerated rotations. One even exhibited a strange toning around the rim, almost suggesting exposure to different atmospheric conditions at the moment of striking. Another unverified quirk that stoked collector speculation. And then came the twist no one saw coming. In 2022, a private estate sale in upstate New York revealed a previously unknown specimen. A 1978 quarter struck on a blank intended for a Susan B. Anthony dollar. Slightly larger, heavier, with a dramatic off-center strike, it was unmistakably a mint error, and it bore the same ghosted lettering and die rotation as the others. This discovery challenged the community once again. It suggested that the errors of 1978 may have been far broader than originally believed, possibly involving mismatched planchets or cross-metal errors, a dream for error coin collectors. Though only one such example has ever been verified, it remains a prized piece in a private collection, reportedly acquired for over $35,000. And as more time passes, the 1978 Washington quarter, once the overlooked sibling in a line of post-silver common currency, continues to surprise. It teaches that even the most familiar coins can hide untold secrets. That the machines of the mint, however precise, can birth anomalies of unintentional art. And that sometimes value isn't born in silver or gold, but in the rare convergence of flaw, timing, and discovery. Want to dive deeper into other mysterious finds like this? I can show you a 1970s coin error, F, an off-metal planchet discovery, F, or even a high-value quarter twist. It began, as many things do, in quiet routine. The year was 1990, a time when the United States Mint was deep in the flow of production, churning out millions of Washington quarters with practiced precision. There was no celebration attached to this year, no commemorative design or groundbreaking shift in composition. It was business as usual at the Philadelphia and Denver mints, where over 1 billion quarters were struck, simple, utilitarian coins meant to fuel commerce, not curiosity. The Washington quarter had remained largely unchanged since 1932. Its copper-nickel-clad composition was now standard, its design familiar to every pocket and purse in the country. George Washington's stoic profile on the obverse, the spread-winged eagle perched above arrows and olive branches on the reverse. In 1990, the process was streamlined. Dies were prepared and polished, planchets cleaned and fed into the presses with mechanical consistency. And yet, somewhere in that precise process, something unexpected crept through unnoticed. A flaw, an imperfection, the kind of anomaly that escapes the eye when millions of identical coins pass by at breakneck speed. Years passed before the oddity would draw real attention. It was discovered not by a professional grader, not by a mint employee or historian, but by a quiet, meticulous man named Caleb Hensley in rural Ohio. Caleb had no credentials, no formal numismatic training. What he did have was an eye for detail and an obsession with roll searching. Every evening, he'd sit at his kitchen table with a magnifying glass and boxes of bank-wrapped quarters, looking for double dies, filled mint marks, and the occasional off-center strike. It was during one of these sessions that he found it. A 1990p quarter with a surface that seemed off. The details of Washington's hair were unusually soft, as though smoothed over. The word, Liberty, appeared slightly misaligned, barely, but perceptibly slanted toward the rim. But what truly caught Caleb's attention was the "In God We Trust." The G looked strangely blurred, almost as if ghosted or weakly struck. At first, he thought it might just be heavy wear, but the coin had sharp rims, no signs of circulation. The reverse was strong and detailed. It was the obverse that bore the flaw. He placed it aside, uncertain of its significance. But something about it gnawed at him. Over the next few weeks, Caleb reviewed dozens of 1990 quarters from his stash. Most looked ordinary. Then, another surfaced again from Philadelphia, bearing the same faint weakness in the obverse strike. The same tilted Liberty, the same ghosted G. He began comparing weights, rim thickness, and even measured the diameter with a borrowed caliper. The differences were minuscule, but they were real. Word started to spread when Caleb posted images to a small online forum. Most users shrugged it off. A few dismissed it as dieware. But one user, an archivist from a Southern numismatic club, asked for high-resolution photos. He responded a week later with a message that changed everything. "This might be a missing clad layer error," the reply read, "or something even more unusual, an improperly annealed planchet or altered die pressure. Either way, it's not common." Theories swirled. Was it a simple strike-through error? A planchet flaw? A misfeed in the colored die that caused a weakness on only one side? The coin didn't quite fit the mold of typical errors. It was too subtle for dramatic misalignments, too clean for a die cap or cud, and too detailed to be considered just worn. Then came the turning point. A submission to a grading service resulted in a new label. Obverse weak strike, possible die adjustment error, MS61. Not quite a glowing grade, but the designation was enough to spark curiosity. Soon, A few more examples emerged, mostly from the Philadelphia Mint, though one surfaced from Denver. Each shared a set of peculiarities: soft obverse detail, ghosting in the motto, rim variants. A quiet buzz was growing. At a regional coin show in 2015, one of these quarters was brought out during a private dealer session. It sold that evening for $1,100, its owner stunned at the price for a coin he once deemed a curiosity. A ripple effect began. Collectors who had ignored 1990 quarters now began combing their hoards for anything similar. Some found pieces with partial clad layer loss. Others found examples with dramatically off-center strikes. But it was the weak strike, the elusive soft obverse, that fascinated most. Not flashy, but enigmatic. A mechanical whisper hidden among billions of coins. Experts debated. Was it a die adjustment test coin that accidentally made it into circulation? A mint technician preparing a press by lightly testing the strike pressure only to let one escape the reject bin? Or was it a result of a failing press toward the end of a production run, causing inconsistent pressure on a specific batch? In 2018, another coin entered the spotlight. This one had a particularly soft strike, but also a light toning and amber halo across the obverse. It added an aesthetic mystery to its mechanical one. That coin was featured in a coin magazine and eventually auctioned online for over $3 for $100. But the twist, what truly turned the narrative upside down, came in 2021, when a collector in Pennsylvania submitted a 1990 quarter that appeared normal until examined under UV light. The obverse revealed a faint but unmistakable impression of a second date, almost overlaid beneath the existing 1990. Theories exploded. Was this a double strike that had somehow reset on the same planchet? A slipped planchet during the feed that realigned imperfectly before the second blow? The grading service labeled it obverse misstrike, dual impressions, MS62. It sold quietly through a private collector network for $9,800. That sale made headlines in niche numismatic circles, and once again brought the 1990 quarter under scrutiny. The U.S. Mint has never publicly acknowledged the source of these anomalies. No official die breakdowns, no archive press errors. And that absence of clarity has only added to the allure. The 1990 quarter was never meant to be special. It carried no silver, no commemorative design. But in its quiet uniformity, a rare mechanical hiccup had spawned a subclass of valuable errors. Today, only a handful of high-grade examples are known with these strange obverse characteristics. The average collector may still overlook them, seeing just another dull coin from the end of the Reagan era. But to those in the know, the 1990 Washington quarter holds secrets of flawed machinery, hurried production, and the occasional beauty of mistake. One particularly pristine piece, graded MS64 with full ghosting and visible rim variation, crossed the auction block in 2024 for a final price of $12,200. The next time you flip a 1990 quarter, take a second look. Somewhere in the ordinary, the extraordinary might just be staring back. If you're curious about more oddities like this, I can help you explore coins with ghosted lettering, F, rare weak strike errors, F, or even unexpected high-value quarters, F. It was 1998, a year that should have been unremarkable for the Washington quarter. There were no changes in composition, no dramatic redesigns, and no commemorative programs to break tradition. The U.S. Mint pressed on, producing over 1.7 billion quarters that year from its Philadelphia and Denver facilities, coins meant for vending machines, toll booths, and casual transactions. The kind of coin you'd flip into a coffee shop tip jar and never think of again. The Washington quarter had been a familiar companion for generations, with George Washington's profile quietly guarding the obverse since 1932. The reverse still bore the iconic eagle, wings spread, arrows clutched firmly, with olive branches below. It was classic, dependable, and exactly what most Americans expected in their change. But as it turned out, 1998 was hiding something. something that almost no one noticed until years later. There was no lightning strike of discovery, no media splash or mint press release. Just an odd moment in a collector's living room nearly 2 decades later. His name was Vincent Marquez, a Florida-based roll hunter known for his quiet diligence. Every evening, under a vintage desk lamp, he'd sift through rolls of coins pulled from banks, gas stations, and old coin shops. He wasn't chasing silver, he was chasing flaws. Errors. The tiny accidents that slipped through the mint's mechanical heartbeat. One night, a 1998 quarter caught his eye. It wasn't missing a part, it wasn't off-center or clipped, but something felt wrong. Washington's face looked blurred, not worn, but almost like it had melted slightly around the edges. The details in the hair seemed washed out, the word, Liberty, appeared subtly shifted downward. But most striking was the date. The 8 in 1998 looked as if it had been stretched, its loops slightly oval, as if squeezed in the striking process. Vincent set it aside. Not convinced, not certain. Just curious. Over the following weeks, his attention drifted more and more toward other 1998 quarters. He noticed that some had strong, crisp strikes with sharp lettering and precise reading on the edges. But just a few shared those peculiar traits. Slight obverse softness, warped digits, ghosted edges around the date. No two were exactly alike, but the pattern was undeniable. He took the oddest of the bunch to a local coin show, where dealers peered at it with raised eyebrows and hesitant theories. "Maybe a filled die," one said. "Could be a misaligned die strike," another muttered. A third, older gentleman turned it over slowly and simply said, "You've got something here." That same coin, after weeks of investigation, was submitted for grading. It came back with an unusual label. "Obverse strike misalignment, MS63. While not a headliner, the designation lit a fuse. Soon, collectors began reporting other odd 1998 quarters, some with minor doubling on the lettering, others with missing clad patches or faint impressions on the reverse. But it was the obverse misalignments that drew the greatest attention. What caused them? Theories stacked like puzzle pieces, none fitting perfectly. Some speculated a weakened collar die, causing planchets to shift slightly during the strike. Others suspected a batch of improperly prepared dies that degraded quickly, losing sharpness and alignment. Still others argued for a more exotic possibility, overpolished dies used to extend life, resulting in soft design impressions and inconsistent strikes. What no one could answer definitively was why it occurred mostly in 1998, and why only in a limited batch. One especially intriguing coin surfaced in 2020. It featured a partial collar strike, where the reeded edge suddenly flattened halfway around the coin. On that same piece, the word trust had lost its sharpness entirely, appearing faint and shadowed. When auctioned at a private event in San Diego, that quarter fetched $1,950. Then came a revelation. In late 2021, a collector in Michigan discovered what looked like a standard 1998 quarter until he flipped it under magnification. The United States of America lettering on the reverse had an eerie, doubled halo around the letters. Not the bold, obvious doubling of a classic double die, but faint, ghostly shadows that suggested a misalignment or vibration in the die press. The coin was clean, uncirculated, no signs of damage. Just a whisper of a second image. That coin was authenticated as an unconfirmed vibration double strike and sold through an online numismatic forum for $3,600. And still, no official word from the mint. No documentation. No press announcement. Only speculation, private discussion, and a growing realization that the 1998 quarter may be one of the decade's most overlooked era-rich issues. A twist arrived in 2023, when a collector cross-referenced multiple misaligned obverse errors and noticed that nearly all of them came from Philadelphia. Further inspection revealed that the mint mark, P, itself was occasionally misbunched, positioned slightly off-axis, as if hand set too quickly. This triggered fresh conversation. Could the Mint have manually reset some of the die mechanisms during a press calibration that year? If so, the misalignments might have been more widespread than anyone assumed. But here's where the story truly takes an unexpected turn. A previously unknown quarter surfaced in early 2024, discovered in a sealed 1998 Mint set. It bore the same weak obverse traits a ghosted 8, a tilted Liberty, but it also featured a minor dive break running vertically from Washington's eye to his collar. Not dramatic, but precise, like a hairline fracture frozen in time. The coin was described as a cumulative error specimen, a perfect storm of several minor minting flaws that together created something profoundly rare. It was graded MS65 with error designation, and when it hit the auction block that fall, it sold for a record $14,200. The buyer, a prominent East Coast numismatist who declared it the most subtle and stunning Washington quarter I've ever seen. And that's the truth about the 1998 Washington quarter. A coin dismissed by most as ordinary. Over 1 billion made, scattered across states, jingling in pockets, abandoned in drawers. But in that river of routine, a few escaped the rules. A few were flawed just enough to be perfect. Today, collectors still comb rolls and mint sets, searching for the ghosted date, the slanted motto, the flat rims or featherlight strikes. Somewhere out there, more are waiting. Quiet, unnoticed, until the right eyes see them for what they are. Among those discovered so far, the highest recorded sale of a 1998 Washington quarter error featuring a full obverse misalignment, strike doubling, and die crack closed at $14,200 in 2024. Want to dig deeper into these mysteries? You might enjoy exploring Washington quarters with subtle strike error, rare misaligned die coins, or other mint set surprises hiding in plain sight.